All right, seniors, welcome to your final demonstration on Vectr. Today we are going to be creating a little YouTube banner for my math tutoring YouTube channel. So this is what I want it to look like. You guys are all going to be creating this step by step. And in the process, we are going to be using the pen tool, the pencil tool, text, and some more shapes. And that will cover all of the basic tools that we will use that you will use for your final project. So let's go ahead and get started by creating a new file, and we will name that file Mr. M's Tutoring. Make sure you click Save File Name, and you should see that change up in the tab. Alright, so now that we've got that new file name, the next thing we need to do is we need to change the canvas size. So if you didn't find this out yet, or if you haven't figured this out, if you go to Pages, you can see that you can change the page size down in this corner here. So right now, the default setting is 640 by 640, and that should be everyone's default setting. If it's not, then I don't know, maybe you changed it or something, but it's not a big deal because we're actually going to be changing to a different canvas size, and we're going to be doing one of the default sizes. So if you click on this custom size dropdown, you can see all the different options we had. So we've talked about the uses of vector graphics. Obviously, you can use them in social media. So if you're putting your logo on your YouTube channel, your Twitter, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, you want to make sure that it's the right size for each of those places. But we could also create backgrounds. So if we wanted to put our logo on the background of our MacBook or an iPad or an iPhone, we can create all those right in here with these default sizes. Then we have all of our standard paper sizes, and then the last thing, and this is where I told you that a lot of businesses will use vector files for their advertisements on websites because they load really quickly. So you can see that these are all your default sizes of your web advertisements. So if you were creating an advertisement, or you're creating a logo, or like an image to advertise your business, and you wanted to do it in a different advertisement, you can change these right in here. Okay, so I told you that for the purpose of this project, we're going to be creating a YouTube channel header for me. So we'll click on YouTube channel, and it doesn't look like anything changed, but you can see that now this canvas is going over here. It's also going down. So if we scroll down, we can see that it's bigger there, and if we scroll over, we can see that it's also bigger over here. Okay, so we want to be able to see the whole canvas. So to do that, we'll go ahead and zoom out. And once you've zoomed out enough, then all we have to do is center it. And now we can get to work. Okay, so you can see that there's lots of different things going on here. We're actually going to start with this pie logo because that'll allow us to look at the difference between the pen tool and the pencil tool. Then we'll move over to the graph, create this graph here. Then we'll move to these little math symbols, and we'll finish with all the text. So let's go ahead and first think about the pi symbol. Now, I am not a good enough artist to just freehand a pi symbol. If you were, and you had steady hands, you could use this pencil tool. All the pencil tool is a tool that follows wherever your cursor is. So if I click and drag here, let's see, can I create a pi sign? Oh, I could create a pi sign. Look at that. But if I was thinking about, okay, this is going to be an advertisement, this is going to be my YouTube logo, yeah, that's pretty ugly there. You can also see, like, there's a gap in between here. It's not closed. It really doesn't look anything like this nice professional pi sign up there. So really, when you're thinking about the pencil tool, if you're going to be freehanding anything and you're fine with it not being, really nice and crisp, that's really the only time you would use it. Or maybe for like a signature, if you were signing something, because you can do that as well. But other than those, few purposes there, the pencil tool is it's not as useful because again, it just follows your cursor. It doesn't do any like straight paths or smooth curves. It's not as useful. So instead of doing that, instead of trying to freehand it, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a picture of this pie image from the internet. I'm going to trace it, but I'm not going to trace it using the pencil tool. I'm going to trace it using the pen tool. And that'll allow me to be very exact, have nice smooth curves, and then I can get rid of that image that I pulled in there after it's traced. So what you need to do right now is you need to download the Pi image from the file, so it should have been in there, and then once you have it downloaded, you can upload it, and now that it's uploaded, I can move it to the spot that I want, and actually I want to scale this down a little bit because I don't want it to be this big. I could trace it this big, but then that would just make me have to click and drag a lot longer. So let's go ahead and make this, let's start with a 400, that's too small. Maybe 500. Notice that this link is there, so whenever I'm scaling up the width, it's also scaling the height. I think, 500 actually, that might be just right. Looks pretty good. About 500. And we'll move it to the top right corner there. Don't worry so much about the position, really focus more on how we're going to use these tools. Okay, so now that we've got this image, let's go ahead and zoom in on it so that we can trace it. So I'm going to zoom, make sure it's in my window. Zoom in a little bit more. Okay. Now, the last thing I'm going to do before I trace it is I'm actually going to lock it in place. And this will allow me to trace over it without having to deal with boxes popping up or anything like that. So if I right-click, lock object, now you can see it's like it's part of the background. And that will make it a lot easier to trace. Okay, so let's go ahead and choose the pen tool. Again, if we tried to trace with the pencil tool, we could try to be exact here, but that is not great looking. Not professional. We want something that's going to trace that exact. So instead of doing that, we'll choose the pen tool. And what the pen tool does is it creates straight lines between anchor points. So anytime you click, it creates an anchor point, and then the line just is connected with straight lines all the way through your anchor points. So I'll start by clicking in this top right corner. If I want to just have a straight line across, like across the top here for a good part of this, I can just let it go. I don't need to put anchor points in there. It's a straight line. But as I get to these curves, this is where I'm going to have to start adding in more and more anchor points. So let's start to go down a little bit here. And as I hit these sharp curves, I need more anchor points. Now, the nice thing about the pen tool is that if you make a mistake, once you finish, you can go back and easily change it. Now for this, you can see all these blue lines are popping up. It's because my snapping's turned on. And I think for this tracing part, I want to turn that off because it's going to make it a lot more challenging. Again, along curves, especially sharp curves, the more anchor points, the smoother the curve. If you have fewer anchor points, you're going to have really, really choppy curves, and it's going to be noticeable. But across straight lines, I don't need so many anchor points. This is completely straight. Alright, now I've got straight across. One more curve. Do not let up on the anchor points. You will regret it if you get through this and you're like, oh man, it's easier to add them in now than it is after the fact. Okay, now we're getting to where we have some straight shots. So not so many anchor points are needed. Straight over and finish right there. Okay, so now you can't really see it yet. You can kind of see the outline over here and over here. But if we click and drag to move this, you can see that we have this nice pie outline. So now that we have that, that's great. Now we don't need our old bitmap image anymore. So we will right click, unlock all objects, and then we'll go ahead and delete that bitmap image. And now we just have the outline of our pie. And you can see it's pretty good. There's a few parts here where it's a little choppy, and I'm going to go back in and edit those. But for the most part, you can see that because I did so many of those anchor points, it's nice and smooth. And I don't really see too many errors in there. Like I said, maybe right in here and up here it's a little choppy. We can go in and fix that. But overall, it's pretty good. So to go in and fix anything, once you've done use the pen tool to create an object, double click on the object, and then you can edit any of these. So probably want to move this over. I actually probably want to add one more anchor point in. So I can just click to add another anchor point, and then that should make it a little bit smoother. Going down in there. Okay, so that looks better. If I right click out, yeah, that's nice and smooth now. And I think the only other one I wanted to really change was right in here. That one up a little bit. Now that's nice and smooth. Over here, just a little bit. Oh, that's too far. Okay, there we go. Alright, so that looks pretty good. And remember, because I drew this using the pen tool, this is now a part of the vector file. So if I scale this up or down, it won't lose any resolution. Alright, now we don't want it to be like see-through or white. We actually want it to be black. So if we change the color, anytime you want to get the pure black, all you have to do with any of the colors, like selections here, if you go to the bottom right, it'll go pound 00000, and that's what we want. Now, we don't need the border anymore, so we can turn that off. And so now you can see that we have just our pie logo, and it is part of the vector file. So now I can zoom back out, now that I have that in there, and we can focus on the other parts. Okay, so we've got our pie logo. That's cool. Now we're going to go to the graph. So for this graph, we could use the pen tool to just draw like a straight line down, straight line over. The problem with that is very similar to where if we would have used like the square and use a border, is that if we wanted to scale this up or down, so if we maybe wanted to turn this YouTube banner into like a real banner, we wouldn't be able to do that because the border would stay the exact same width. So our graph would end up looking like it was like pencil thin. So just like we did when we were doing the Cristo Rey logo, we're just going to use rectangles to actually make like a thin border, or in this case, make our X and our Y axis. So let's go ahead actually, before we do that, and let's make this pie just a uniform height. So it's 487 by 468. Let's go ahead and change this to be a height of 500, and then we'll leave the width locked so that we keep the exact same proportions. So it'll be 500 by 520. And perfect. So again, don't worry so much about the position and the dimensions. Really want you to focus more on how you use these new tools. Okay, so the next thing then is creating the X and the Y axis. And the reason that I changed the one height to 500 is that if I have one of my objects being 500, I might as well have the other one be 500 too, so it looks uniform. So we'll change this height to 500. And then the width is something that we're going to have to change, but we don't want to affect this 500. So now we can unlink these, and that's a little bit too thick. So maybe 20 as a width would be a little bit better. Okay, so we want the X and the Y axis to be the exact same size. So to do that, the easiest way would just be to duplicate. We do need to rotate this so that it is perpendicular. So rotating it to be perpendicular would be 90 degrees. And we want this to be just a little bit above where the bottom is. So we can check the Y positions on these. Y position is 82.88. Let's make this the same, 82.88. So now I know that they're lined up, the tops are lined up, and then I can make this bottom accordingly. So that looks good. We'll make this black. And then the last thing we need to do is add in the actual curve itself. So we're going to use the pen tool again. This time we're going to use the curve feature in it. So if we click the pen tool, we want to start at the origin, 0, 0. And we're just trying to create like a little exponential graph. So we want a starting point here. We want an ending point up here. Now, when you make the second click, you need to hold down the left click. So hold it down, and if you move it up and down, you can see that it changes the curve. So all we want to do is make it like very exponential. So if I just drag this up here, I can move it around a little bit more. That looks pretty good. And now you can see that, okay, well, it wants to continue on. If I want to stop at any point, so I let go of my left click. If I want to stop, I just press escape on the keyboard. And that'll give me that line. And then we can change the thickness on this line by just adding to the border. So 12 would be good, maybe 15. Go 15. So we've got a nice graph there, and we'll add in the X and the Y text after the fact. So we know that these are lined up. We're going to have Mr. M's and then math tutoring right down here. But the last things we want to add in, though, are the symbols. So we have the addition sign, the subtraction, the multiplication, and the division. And so to add those in, there's actually two that are already created for you. All you have to do is just choose them. So if you go to more shapes, you can see that we have addition, we have multiplication, but unfortunately, no subtraction or division. Good thing is it's pretty easy to create those. So we'll start with addition, and we'll put that down here. We're going to make them all the exact same size. So we want them to all be 200 by 200. Notice how this is unlinked. I can make my width 200, my height 200, and now it's 200 by 200. That's proportional. Okay? The other one that we have automatically built in is our multiplication. So we'll put that as our third one. Again, we can change it to be 200 by 200. And we do want this to be lined up. It's not automatically snapping there because I turned my snapping off earlier when I was doing the tracing. I'm going to go ahead and turn that back on so that I can just click and drag to see where these would be positioned. And then I'm going to put a division sign in between here and then a subtraction sign over here. So let's create that subtraction sign first. We're just going to create a rectangle because that's all it is. And we want it to be kind of approximately the same height as this addition sign, this part of the addition sign. So, let's see, that looks pretty good. And the only thing that we need to change here, because we know that the height is fine, because that's the same height as this addition sign, we just need to change the width to be 200, because that's the width of our other two signs. And we'll move it over here. With that blue line, we'll know that it is right in the center. And then for division, we're going to use the same subtraction sign as the bar, and then we just need to add like a circle on top and a circle on the bottom. So we'll duplicate. Move this over here. Now all we need to do is add in a circle on the top. We'll make this a 60 by 60 circle. Make sure that's lined up in the middle there with your snapping. Duplicate, and we'll line that up on the bottom. And that looks pretty good. So we've got addition, division, multiplication, subtraction. Okay, now I just want to make sure that these are all the same color, and they're the same color over here. Actually, it looks like they're not, because this is like a blue. So to do that, again, we just go to the bottom right. Now it's 0, 0, 0, 0. Perfect. So we've got our graph, our pie, and our math signs all black, all on this page. Okay, so then the last things we're going to have to do are add in the text. So we have the X and the Y for the graphs, and then we also have Mr. M's math tutoring. So we'll start with the X and Y, and then we'll add in the Mr. M's math tutoring. So whenever you want to add text, you just click on text, and then you click where you want it to go. Now you can see it's super, super small. Like really, 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 really small right down there. So in order to make it bigger, we need to type something first, and then we can change it. So this is going to be where the X goes. So I'm going to do a capital X, and then I'm going to click out. And now I need to be able to click on that small little tiny text, and I can change the font. So let's just change it way bigger. It's only 14 right now. Let's make it 100. Whoa, okay. That's nice and big. Okay, now, this isn't the font that I want. I want the same font that I'm going to have for Mr. M's math tutoring. So that font, if you change from Open Sans, if you go down to #1, that's going to be the font that we are using for today. And then you can make sure it's in the center. Go. Perfect. Okay, so I've got my X. That's great. And then instead of creating a small text again, changing the font, doing all that, I'm just going to duplicate this because I want it to be the exact same size. I'll move it up to the position that I want it to be in, and then I'll just make it a capital Y. Now I've got my X-axis, my Y-axis labeled. Perfect. Okay, and then again, instead of going to that tiny text and then changing the font, I'll just duplicate my X one more time. This is where we're going to have Mr. M's. So I can change that text to be Mr. M's. And then we're going to want to make this way bigger. So maybe 300. Nope, 300 is too small. 400. That looks good. Make sure this is black. Ooh, that's a good one. I just checked and saw this is not black again. So I got to make sure that I change my fonts to be all black. They might look the same, but if it's not the same number down here, it's not the same color. Okay, so we've got Mr. M's, and that's pretty good size, right in between our pie and our graph there. So instead of, again, going from that tiny text and changing the font, we'll just duplicate again. And down here, we'll put math tutoring. And then we want to make sure that this is in the center. So if you highlight or if you click and drag it, once you see that blue line pop up in the middle, that means it's in the exact center. So Mr. M's math tutoring is in the center. We've got our graph, we've got our pie, we've got our symbols. Looks pretty good. So the last thing we want to do is just add in that shadow effect and then add in the background. So we should know how to do shadow. We want to do both of these at the same time because this is what we're going to be creating. So you can either click and drag over both of them. That's one way to do it. Or if you're looking at your layers, you know that these layers right here, so X and Y, those are not the ones we want. The ones we want are these top two, so math tutoring and Mr. M's. So if we click on one and then hold shift and click on the other, it'll highlight them both. So there's two ways to do that. You can either click and drag to highlight, then I'll highlight them both, or you can click on one layer, shift, the other layer, and that has them both highlighted. Okay, so we'll add in the shadow by checking that box. And we're going to change the X offset to 10 and the Y offset to 10. And that makes a nice little popping out so that you can see Mr. M's and the math tutor. So this looks good like as it is. I think that this would be a fine background, but we do want to add in a little bit of color to this. So we're going to add in this blue background, and to do that, it's a little bit more challenging than like just adding a background in PowerPoint. You're actually going to have to create a rectangle that's the exact size of the background, and then you're going to need to move that layer behind everything. So we can click on rectangle. If we have snapping turned on, we can go to the top left corner, all the way down to the bottom right, but uh-oh, it just covered everything up. Remember, these layers are the order in which all of these objects are on top of each other. So right now, the rectangular path is on top of everything. If we wanted to get it behind everything, we just have to click and drag it behind everything. Now, this is a little bit too dark for me, so I'm going to change the color. I'm going to change it to like more of a lighter blue. So let's go into blue, and then you can change the shades. And I like that right there. I think that looks pretty good. And there we go. There we have it. So then all I would have to do is just save this as a vector file and then upload it to YouTube. I would have a very clean, professional YouTube logo for my math tutoring. Okay, so I know in the past I've been having you export the URL. We've had some issues lately with exporting that URL. So when you're finished with this today, to submit it, what I want you to do is export. So you can see that it's nice, perfect, it's big. We're going to go ahead and download it. And you can see that you'll have an SVG file. You won't really be able, like if you open this, it'll just open up a Chrome browser and you'll see it like in a browser window, like this right here. That's fine. I want you to upload that SVG file to Google Classroom. So for the assignment, you're not going to be using a Google form anymore. You're just going to be uploading this directly to the assignment. So this SVG file is what you're uploading to Google Classroom. All right. I hope you guys have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.